everyone, Nicole Steckline, technical agronomist for DeKalb and Asgrow in Northeast Iowa. We're seeing tassels, we will soon be seeing planes. So it begs the question, should I apply fungicide? Here are my top considerations that I think about when making the decision if I should make a fungicide application or not. Consideration number one, and the most important one, yield potential. Because fungicide doesn't make yield, it simply protects the yield that this plant has spent building the entire season. Fungicides, for as magical as they are, can't fix a nutrient deficiency. They can't fix a subpar population. But what they can do is protect the yield that we have. So I'm going to want to make sure that my crop is looking good, I'm set up for good pollination, and that's going to be my number one determining factor on fungicide or not. Number two, and it's a big one, environment and the weather forecast. Now this is twofold. First off, do we have the weather environment forecast that's conducive to disease development? Now, most of our plant diseases are fungal based. Where do you find fungus growing? Warm, wet conditions. So the other part of the environment conversation is, do I have an environment and a forecast for high yields? Or am I going to hit a drought? Or am I going to get flooded out? Because I'm not going to make a $30 application if I'm going to lose my crop. So looking at the environment that we've had recently, we just got off, getting 2 to 3 inches in a lot of places. Got a big storm. And the last week, we were seeing a lot of highs in the mid 70s. We had a lot of dew. We were getting some drizzle. That is a peak environment for fungal disease development. And since we had that weather that week, I am starting to see some baby gray leaf spot, and I also started seeing tar spot. Something else that likes mid 70s and moisture is northern corn leaf blight. Now, we haven't seen a lot of northern corn leaf blight in the last couple of years, but it's still out there. I have found it. It's just waiting for the right conditions. So overall, I think that absolutely we've had the environment to really allow these diseases to kind of kick off and be sitting there. We just need the environment to keep it going. Now, when I look at our next 10-day forecast, most of our temperatures are those averaging around the mid 80s, which isn't going to be hot enough to get us out of the woods quite yet. Now, there's not a whole lot of rain in the next 10-day forecast. But if we do continue to have a high relative humidity, that's going to create moisture in the canopy. We're going to have those dewy mornings and dewy nights. So we don't necessarily need to have a rain to get that moisture. It can just be sitting in there. Now, you look at our different diseases. Northern corn leaf blight needs to have free water on that leaf. Where we look at gray leaf spot, we don't necessarily have to have free water on the leaf. It actually prefers to just have a very high relative humidity for an extended period of time. So high humidities, mid 80s, that's still going to be a very good environment for gray leaf spot. And also, let's face it, as far as a growing environment for corn, we just got a bunch of rain and we're looking at temperatures in the mid 80s. That is peak corn yield making season. So we have a very good outlook as far as weather during pollination. We've also got a very good outlook for disease development. So next consideration, drum roll please, crop rotation. So obviously you're much more likely to get a high pathogen load in a corn on corn acre as opposed to a rotated acre. So I'm going to start my scouting efforts and put those corn on corn acres to the top of the list for priority on getting sprayed or not. Now, this last consideration, which a lot of people tend to focus on, is hybrid response to fungicide. Now, you have a much better chance of predicting whether you're going to have a response to fungicide or not based on the last 3 things that I just talked about. The last one, hybrid response, we tend to get wrapped up around a lot. But if we put a hybrid that's got a very high, low response to fungicide. So let's think a big, robust plant that, has really good disease tolerance scores. If you still put that hybrid into a corn on corn scenario where we've had disease pressure in the past, we got high yield potential in that field, and we've got an environment like this, there's still probably a good chance that we're gonna get our money back on an application on that hybrid, even though we might not typically see a lot of response from it. Particularly with high crop prices, it's not going to take as much of a response to get us paid back on that roughly $30 an acre investment. So we do have differences among these hybrids. What I have done is compiled a list of all of our hybrids, and on that same sheet I have put down, what are the disease ratings for our top diseases in Iowa, but then I also took into consideration stalk strength, root strength, so is it likely to fall down and deteriorate, harvest appearance, is it a plant that falls apart, late season stay green, is it a die and dry type of hybrid. I've taken that together and put it into an index that kind of gives you an idea of what type of plant it is and if it's a plant that will historically respond to fungicide or not. So those are the considerations that I think about when making a fungicide application. Let's head in there and see what we can find. So that's how I make my decisions. I also very often get asked the question, what product should I use? Now, obviously, I'm a little biased towards Delero Complete, but I also think that it is a complete product. So when we look at fungicides in general, you basically got 3 different tiers of products. You got your single modes of action. So you'll only get like a strobe, or it's just a triazole, or it's just an SDHI. In my opinion, spraying a single mode of action fungicide is going to be pushing us towards resistance, because these fungus do have the ability to build resistance to a fungicide. So I'm not going to spray a single mode of action fungicide. The next step is a dual mode of action fungicide. So most of these dual mode of action fungicides like Stratego YLD or Delero, those have 2 different fungicides in them. So you get the strobe, which is our main mode of action for prevention. That's also the one that gives you like that plant health and that greening. And then it's also going to be premixed with a triazole. So that is kind of your, some people will call it curative, but I don't like that term. I like to call it post-infection control. So your strobe is your prevention, and then your triazole is kind of what's trying to kill the infection that is within that plant. So that's our second tier. I still like these, but if I really want to give myself the best control, I'm going to go with one of those 3 mode of action fungicides, which is what Delero Complete is. So those 3 mode of action fungicides are going to contain a strobe, so that's going to be our best preventative fungicide component, along with that greening and plant health. It's also going to have a triazole in there, like we talked before, for post-infection control, but it's also adding a 3rd mode of action called an SDHI. What's interesting about these SDHI fungicide components is that they have very long residual, but they also have a very narrow spectrum of control. What's cool about the SDHI that's in Delero Complete, Delero, I don't know, somebody at Bayer tell me the right way to say it. But the SDHI and Delero Complete, that narrow spectrum of control is really good for gray leaf spot. And typically that is one of our biggest diseases that we deal with here in Iowa. So Delero Complete is going to give us 3 modes of action. That 3rd mode of action that has that long residual is a specializer on gray leaf spot. So that's all I've got for now. I am going to put out a video on scouting for different diseases and show you what I'm seeing here coming up. So otherwise, if you have any questions, call, text, or email.